Welcome to Mission Oriented, a veteran crowd podcast that showcases veteran talent from both the private and public sectors. Their impact is everywhere. We are here to uncover it. Here's your host, Bob Louthan.
Welcome, everybody, to the Mission Oriented podcast on the Veteran Crowd Network. My guest today is Matthew Carter, Rear Admiral, retired United States Navy, a graduate of the Virginia Military Institute. We'll give a big shout out to Raw Virginia Mill, 17-14 over Watford this weekend, by the way. He was a P-3C Orion pilot in the Navy, served 34 years. Moved up through the ranks and had number of commands in the Pacific, in the Arabian Gulf, and in the Mediterranean Sea. And so welcome to the program, Admiral. Thank you for joining us. You are now the chairman of Nova Vets. We're going to talk a lot about that in a little bit, but thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Appreciate being on here, and thanks on behalf of Northern Virginia Veterans Association.
I always start out by asking my guest how they chose the path to join the all-volunteer military in the first place. Can you go back to that 18-year-old Matt Carter and tell me a little bit about how you ended up going to VMI and choosing to go in the military?
Yeah, certainly. I think your generation, my generation, right, we're the same time frame here. Is somehow most of us from this generation are connected to World War II. So my father was a enlisted sailor in World War II and was in the amphibious Navy and fought in the Pacific. So I grew up understanding what he did in the war. And then I grew up in Northern Virginia, which being in Northern Virginia, as a lot of people know, close to the Pentagon, you're around government officials, military officials the whole time. So the whole time growing up the military was in my family. So that's just what grabbed me, and that's what I wanted to do graduating from VMI.
How'd you end up choosing VMI? Were there other options, or was it a family thing?
Well, now you're going to get me to divulge secrets about myself in public, Bob. I tried for the Naval Academy and tried for West Point and didn't get into either one. So I submitted an application for VMI and was fortunate enough to get accepted. And I'm glad I went there. It's a great school, and probably gave me the discipline I could use that early in my life.
Yeah, it's a similar. I'll share a little vignette. I mean, my father tried to get into the Naval Academy and couldn't get in, and ended up going to VMI, and it changed his life and set our whole family sort of on a different career path. You come out. Let's talk a little bit about you wanted to be in aviation. You became a P-3C Orion pilot.
I think I would tell you my aviation background started while I was still in high school. I had flown up one day to Patuxent River. A close friend of the family was a Marine colonel, and he brought my father and myself up to Patuxent River to watch Harriers jump off of ski ramps, a new thing the Marine Corps was trying. And I had met a retired Navy commander that day, and we got to talking. And he'd worked out of Quantico at the flying club. And he said, "Hey, you come down, you rent the airplane, and I'll teach you how to fly." So I actually wound up getting my private pilot's license while I was in high school. So the aviation bug was in me from an early age. And then I went down to, obviously went to VMI after that, graduated, and was fortunate enough to get selected for pilot training, went down and to Pensacola, started there.
And got selected for the P-3, a career in that. You were also involved in the transition from the P-3 to the P-8, right?
Once I got senior and a flag officer, I wasn't flying that much anymore, obviously, when I got that senior. So I'd taken over the Patrol and Reconnaissance group in Norfolk, Virginia, which leads the Maritime Patrol Reconnaissance force. And so I was leading the community. Many predecessors well before me did a great job getting the Navy to buy that airplane. Brings on a great capability for the Navy nowadays. And I just inherited all the fantastic work they did. So for 18 months, I led the community, bringing in the transition to the platform.
Well, thank you very much for your service. As we talked about before the program, I've been learning a lot about the Brown Shoe Navy, and it's certainly it is amazing the level of skill and the training that is provided to naval aviators, and Sorry to the Air Force guys out there, but they are, the best pilots in the world are naval aviators. And I'm pretty sure you'll agree with me on that one. Hey, one other quick little note, maybe a little bit of a VMI connection, but you've got a little bit of ties to volunteering at the George C. Marshall International Center. Can you touch on that before we start to talk about Nova Vets?
That was early on, so actually I'm not attached to those guys anymore. I retired from the Navy in 2019, moved back to Northern Virginia. A lot of my brother rats live up here, and so I went to a ceremony there at the Marshall Foundation and ran into a couple guys. One of them, Tommy Greenspan, asked me to join a group. I did that at the time, but I shortly moved. I guess 6-8 months after I moved back here and to Northern Virginia, I moved over to Japan with the company I work for now. So that kind of ended that. I couldn't do it from Japan. But also
Understood.
during that meeting is another brother rat grabbed me and said, "Hey, why don't you come work for Nova Vets?" So that started that journey.
Well, so let's make that transition to Nova Vets. Why don't you tell everybody what this organization is about? We've had guests on before, but share with everybody what Nova Vets is doing right now.
Yeah, certainly. Great question. I appreciate you asking that. It's a local veteran nonprofit that helps veterans with their families, and it's really the most vulnerable, such as the elderly, low income, and health challenged. And it's concentrated in 10 counties or so in Northern Virginia, but it's taking care of those folks that obviously served the country, did their time, and now for whatever reason in their life, they need assistance. And that's what Nova Vets does, taking care of those. And to be a little more specific, it's really about case management. So a lot of veterans organizations, and there are many good ones out there, will help a veteran, but they, like a lot of things we see, they get handed off from one part of an organization to another. Nova Vets on case management, where we take the individual and do a full intake and understand every single need, and then we manage that case all along to the veteran. So it's not, we don't off from one organization to another.
Can you is there anything you can share about the scope of this problem? And then I'm going to drill down to things, whether it's health, whether it's finances. We hear a lot about veteran suicide, but I think there are underlying symptoms that some veterans are facing. And let's talk about the scope of it. I mean, and a lot of veterans, like, are doing very well, but there is a small percentage that do need our help.
Yeah, so let me that comes the way I'd answer that. 30 things pop into mind for me. First is 32% of the veterans living within our service area are vulnerable due to poverty, age, mental or emotional challenges, and or disability. Right, that's a pretty broad
That's an
category.
astounding number.
32% of the people, and over 2022, the specialists of Nova Vets helped 2,200 veteran cases, and we're on track to surpass that for 2023, right? So that's 2,200 cases, 32% of veterans in the area that we're helping, which, to your point, that's a pretty significant number. We also in 2022 provided 1,500 rides, transportation to medical appointments. And that's one of the services Nova Vets provides, gets veterans to their medical appointments when they don't have a means to get there for whatever reason. They may not own a car, the distance may be too great, they may have a challenge driving. But we got them 1,500 rides in 2022. Now, unfortunately, we did that on a pilot program off of a grant, and that grant ran out in March 23. So the ride program we were offering veterans has ended for right now while we look for another grant sponsor.
Let me break this down a little further. The demographics of veterans are changing. There was an enormous number of World War II and Korean War veterans, a large number of veterans from the Vietnam conflict. Are you seeing that most of the folks you help are older veterans, or is it spread across even the young, post 9/11 era veterans that younger people?
It's spread across all veterans, right? I don't think it's not specific to an age group anymore. it's those people that maybe we happen to come across that somebody mentions, or it's those that reach out to us. And as you well know, we've been in some kind of conflict for years now, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, and all the other wars you just mentioned. So age, a specific conflict doesn't lend itself just to being a veteran in need. It spans all ages.
The Mission Oriented podcast is sponsored by Transact Capital Partners. Transact Capital Partners is a full-service mergers and acquisitions advisory firm specializing in the confidential sale and acquisition of privately owned mid-tier businesses. At Transact Capital Partners, we believe that our veterans continue to lead impactful lives as civic and business leaders. Their leadership and management skills, hardened in the crucible of the military, are key drivers of success. Veterans are mentally tough team players and creative problem solvers imbued with a heightened sense of ethics and personal accountability. Transact Capital Partners is committed to supporting veteran business owners throughout the life of their companies, building professional relationships and networks, advising on capital formation, mergers, and acquisitions. Contact the veterans on our team, Matt Kane, Ross Harris, and Bob Louthen at transactcapital.com.
Hey, you're listening to the Mission Oriented podcast on the Veteran Crowd Network. My guest is Rear Admiral Matthew Carter, U.S. Navy retired. Admiral, I'd like to drill down and talk about what do you think are sort of the root causes of the problems that the veterans that are facing that serve you. You know, the symptoms are they're not going to the doctor, or the symptoms are homelessness, the symptoms are financial crises. Or maybe one of the root causes is a financial issue that drives some of these other things. Are you finding that there are certain root causes that are driving some of this need in Northern Virginia and nationally?
Bob, that's a good question. I don't know if I have not had a discussion yet where it's a particular root cause. I firmly don't believe there is a single root cause to the issues our veterans face. Some of it is obviously poverty. Some of it is not being able to find a job. We've seen that over the years here. Some of it's age. Some of it's mental or emotional disabilities, right? It runs the gamut of challenges that veterans face. And a lot of people face around the world, but we're specifically talking about veterans here. So I would not say there's a particular root cause. It's a compilation of issues.
One of the topics that I've covered a lot on the Mission Oriented podcast is mental health. And one of my previous guests, General Martin, has recently written a book about his struggles personally with mental health issues and getting important. One of the things that I think in the veteran community, perhaps, but also in the active duty military community, is this stigma, if you will, for mental health issues. And I think the tide has been turning with regards to mental health issues. But in the past, not too distant past, it was a stigma. It was a career a ruining move to admit that you might be struggling with some of these issues. And I think it's important to bring these issues out into the light and help people with these things. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I would agree with you that we've come a long ways in addressing it. I would tell you early on in my career, nobody talked about it. And it could be a whole range of issues that caused the mental health problems. But nobody really talked about it. I think being at war in Afghanistan and Iraq for so many years and seeing that and understanding it, we've come a long ways. And now it is not something that is put behind the curtain, but it's something brought forward. And there's all kinds of resources that the military, no matter what service you're in, assist people with. And it's no longer it's no longer something to be hidden and not discussed, right? The resources are there to help people, and hopefully there's a lot of people that take advantage of it. And that's in the military, but also outside the military with all the veteran services that the country has to offer.
Right. I think it's time to bring these things out into the light, because these illnesses are, deadly. And the sad thing about mental illness, or I'll call brain diseases and that sort of thing, is that rather than rallying around the individual, these people tend to fight these issues alone. And a cancer patient, family rallies around, friends rally, that sort of thing. But typically when you have a mental health issue, people shy away from that, and we've really got to change the way that our society looks at these issues. Let's take a step back. Let's talk about how Nova Vets works, and what are the pressing needs for Nova Vets from your chair, your seat as chair of Nova Vets.
Well, the first way I would tell you to answer the first part of your question, the way it works is Nova Vets has a quality of life cycle that it deals with. And that goes back to the case management of a person. We don't hand off a person. When we find an issue, we don't hand them off to another part of the system that handles just that one issue. We essentially take care of the whole case management. So whether that's healthcare and wellness, family and caregiver, finance and legal, employment and housing, education, resources, transportation, fitness, arts, and recreation. Those are all different aspects of the way we look at a case management, because each individual is different and each individual will have different needs. So that's the way we specifically do that. And we have a specialist that deals with each client, each veteran that has a particular need. And as I said earlier in the call, we don't hand them off, right? It's a continuous process, but it's also a continuous process in that it allows follow-up. And I get a story I can tell you later on of a veteran that does that follow-up piece, a great example of how that process works. The second part of your question I would tell you is we are a nonprofit organization, and so we rely heavily on grants. And is that income where people are generous, whether it's a small donation, whether it's a company providing a larger donation through a grant process, right? It's those donations that enable us to do our work and help so many veterans that are in need.
From a capital standpoint, there are grants, but you guys all often are actively raising funds from the private sector as well. Are there corporate sponsors that participate as well?
We do reach out to corporate sponsors, and you can see some of them on our webpage, novavets.org. If somebody wanted to look that up, you can see that. And there's also a way to contribute. So if somebody hearing this podcast and wants to contribute, we'd welcome their participation.
Let me follow that lead also here. You mentioned a story. Is there a story of a vet that Nova Vets has worked with that stands out in your mind that you'd like to share?
There is. Well, let me give you two, if I may, because both of these resonate with me very well. One is an old veteran, U.S. Navy veteran, that we were helping to get to medical appointments and his dialysis treatments. But this particular veteran is blind, so he uses text to talk, to call, or send emails to Nova Vets. But one of the issues is this veteran, other than his wife, has no family around the area, so they rely on Nova Vets. Goes back to the transportation plan I told you about before. And both the veteran and his spouse are very appreciative of the work that Nova Vets has done to be able to take him and get him to the analysis treatments. And it's just an impactful story when you hear the whole thing and listen to it. The second one, and I'm gonna read this to you if that's okay. I'm gonna look at the testimonial. And I actually heard this story a couple of weeks ago. We were at a Nova Vets picnic, and Katie, one of the support specialists, said, "Here's what's impacted me with my job. Here's how one of my veterans has connected with me." And so this is an elderly homeless veteran that Katie was working with, and says, "I have worked with Samuel," is this individual's particular name. "I have worked with Samuel since early June. He would check in with me almost daily to let me know how he was doing or how his job search was going. As the summer went on, he found a job and would check in to let me know how his job was going. Now he is in the process of trying to secure an apartment. Almost every weekday, he still checks in with me. When he's able to, he tries to attend church in the morning. This is very important to him. A few weeks ago, Samuel told me that our daily talks have become a way for him to attend church a second time. He told me that these conversations and check-ins have become that church for him. It means so much for him to have someone to check in with him, to just talk about what has happened throughout his day. It makes him feel seen, and that's part of getting about, right? The last sentence I just read to you, it makes him feel seen and not alone. And that ties back into my part where I said earlier that we do case management. We don't pass a veteran off from one part of this system to another, but we stay in touch with this. But we stay in touch with the veteran, and we get to know the veteran and help them, right? And so many veterans, I believe, part of it is having a sense of community and having a sense of inclusion and involvement with other people. I think you mentioned that earlier, where some of our mental health problems would just go unknown and people don't address them. As you can see in this particular case, this veteran having a chance to reach out to Katie is a lifeline to him.
It must take it must take a significant organization to have that level of engagement with an individual, particularly when you're doing, helping 2,000 veterans, on an annual basis. Can you talk a little bit about the organization, the size of the staff, and it probably stretched thin, though, even though you'd like to have more help.
Yeah, it's a very small staff, and we're always looking for volunteers to take on more. They do stay gainfully employed, but I think if you think this story of Katie, what it's really important about is the passion that each one of our employees brings to helping take care of veterans. And many of us are connected to a veteran one way or another, whether it's the spouse, whether it's a previous veteran, like myself, a veteran. And I just felt compelled when I got out of the active duty military to give back, because there's so much need. So it's a very, very small staff, and we're always looking for volunteers so we can do more.
I imagine that if the 10 counties that you service are like most counties, their mental health services, their community boards that address these types of things are taxed to the limits as well. And so it's absolutely necessary to supplement mental health services in any community with activities like Nova Vets. If you guys got upcoming events or things that we should talk about?
So those are also listed on the website that I mentioned earlier. And there's different activities that you can do to take part in Nova Vets if people are interested in doing that. There's resources there as how to become a member. Some of it is wreaths across America. We do at Quantico National Cemetery each year. There's brewery events where we go to try to do fundraising. And there's one coming up on November 11th. So those are different activities that we do where you'll see us, but it's probably best if somebody's interested to look at the website, novavets.org, to find out what's out there.
We'll put links to your website and your other social media outlets on the landing page for the show notes for this episode. Admiral, I'll give you the last word. One last parting shot or appeal. One thing that you'd like to say to our listeners today.
I guess I tell them what's in my heart, and that's continue to serve one way or another. And there's all kinds of different ways to serve, but what I would ask people to do if they're interested in Nova Vets is to serve by taking care of a veteran. And you can do that in multiple ways. You can become a member, you can show up to an event and just help out. You can be a sponsor. There are all kinds of different ways to reach out and take care of the great Americans that have given so much to this country through their volunteer service.
Couldn't agree with you more. Admiral Carter, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate spending time and sharing information about the good work that you're doing in and around Northern Virginia. There are veteran service organizations throughout this country that are doing yeoman's work, and Nova Vets is definitely one of them. I'll give you another shout out. I will say Rob Virginia Mill. I always like having fellow VMI graduates on the program. So thanks so much for joining us today. And I'll also throw out an Army Bravo Zulu to you for your performance today. Thanks so much for being on the program. You've been listening to the Mission Oriented Podcast on the Veteran Crowd Network, and that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Mission Oriented. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and you won't miss an episode. To learn more about Mission Oriented and the Veteran Crowd Network, visit us at www.veterancrowdnetwork.com.